equal x, absolute value of x minus 3. They want the domain to be the x's between 0 and 7. And are we going to count 0 and 7 here? How do I know what to do?
Yes, because there's a line on there.
Yeah, these lines right here tell me that I'm going to count 0 and 7. So when I graph this, all they want me to do and talk about is from 0 to 7, I'm going to graph from x is 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. But let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. And I have not, I know what's going to happen, but I'm going to actually need, okay, so all the book cares about is that those between 0 and 7. Doesn't care about anything else. I can use my calculator here. Now, you can hit the math function to get to absolute value. It's usually under the math menu if you're using an Inspire, if you haven't found it yet. On this thing, the quickest way to get to it, and maybe the Inspire does this too, is do you see, look down at 0. Do you see how it says catalog right above it? Guys, make sure you're taking notes too. I don't see much writing going on. Taking notes, okay, just making sure because you won't have any notes to look at. It won't help you when you get home if you don't have notes to look at. So if that 0, on top of it, it says catalog. So if I want to get to the catalog, I hit the second button and then I hit 0. And here's what's cool about it. Okay, no. Is that a new, let's see, second catalog. Okay, when you do that, absolute value is the very first thing that pops up. You can get to it through the math menu. It's just a different, function or operator, but it's always the first thing that's programmed, if you list in alphabetically the things in your calculator, it's the first thing alphabetically. So you can choose it, and you can choose it by hitting enter, and it'll put it up there. On mine, it doesn't look like this. If you've got an older calculator, it looks like this. You hit second 0 to get to the catalog, and then it will be pointing to ABS. Okay, and since it's pointing to ABS, if you just hit enter, it grabs that. And in a lot of calculators, if they're older versions, it'll look like this. The new color ones, if you've got a newer version that are color, a lot of them actually put the absolute value sign up there like that. But otherwise, it's going to show up looking like this, and the inside of the absolute value deals what you're going to be typing in here. How many of you have ABS something?
I got it.
Yeah, because that's what mine looks like. This is just the simulator is the newest and greatest and whatever, Okay, so if I want to graph x minus 3, what I'm going to do is just now see how the cursor's sitting inside of there, and if you've got ABS, it's probably sitting inside of the parentheses, or you go just type in x minus 3. So x minus 3. And if I want to get out of the absolute value sign or out of the parentheses, if you're typing on your calculator and you have this here, I think you just have to type in the parentheses to close it. If yours is sitting inside of it blinking like this,
there's the arrow.
Yeah, you just arrow out of it, and that gets you out of it. Okay. Does anybody need help on their calculator finding the ABS?
What happens if you graph it?
You just hit graph, right? This is some of what you guys were just doing in the last chapters, this absolute value stuff.
Very close. I try to answer it without doing that.
And you can, right? You can do it by hand.
I think got some of it right.
Did you? Good, good. Now, does the calculator show me the whole thing? Do I want the whole thing?
No.
Nope. I just want the parts between 0 and 7. How would be the best? I could do this in my head. All I need to do is take the number and say 0 minus 3. I mean, let's practice that just in case you can look in the calculator. The calculator's going to give you the answer. But let's say we're going to graph 0 and 7, and I can tell between 0 and 7 something funky's happening. It's going down to what, 3 there? Right? And then it starts going back up again. I definitely want to pick that up. So let me put like 3 in there and maybe 1 and maybe 4, just so I got some different points. If what the absolute value does is it represents distance, and so it's always a positive number. So if I put 0 minus 3 in there, I get the absolute value of negative 3, but that's just going to be a positive 3. So when I go graph it, 0, 3 is there. If I graph 1, x is 1, What is 1 minus 3? It is negative 2. But the absolute value of negative 2 is 2. So at 1 we were at 2. Will the absolute value ever give me a negative value? No, because distance is always considered positive, and that's what absolute values are all about. They're all about distances. All right, if I plug in 3 for x, 3 minus 3 is 0, and the absolute value of 0 is 0. So that's where it's coming. It's coming down, and it's hitting this. And then if I plug in 4, 4 minus 3 is 1. Absolute value of 1 is 1. So 4, 1. And I'm just going to do the endpoint so we get it right. If I plug in 7, 7 minus 3 is the absolute value of 4, which is 4. So by 7, it's all the way back up to 4. And I'm going to write that point here because it's going to matter in a minute. So this point on this end was 0, 3. And that point on that end was 7, 4, right? And they want us to tell the range. Okay, I love the whole idea of getting this with the pencil. If I were to move and talk about the range, what I'm looking for is the smallest and the biggest numbers it could be, and then representing, like, are they between those two numbers or what? So let's do it this way. Let me start at the bottom. What's the smallest y value I hit? 0. Now, x is 3, but what's the y? Isn't this 0 over here? Let me write it in black. Isn't that 0? The x-axis is y is 0. So my smallest one is 0. Let me write my range up here. Let me write it in blue. I'll just kind of write over this so it'll stick out with the colors. My range, so my lowest value is 0. I have y's between 0 and what number? What's the biggest one we get if we're just looking from 0 to 7? Would it be over here? And that's 4. Oh, that's just not good. Okay, so my y's are between 0 and 4. Are they equal to 0 and 4, or are those dots colored in? When I drew it, I colored them in because I was just plotting points, right? We always color points in unless, they tell us for some reason not to do it. And since the x's are between 0 and 7, x is 0. Okay, that's the y that goes with x is 0. So we're going to count it because we want to look at that y value. So we're going to color in both of these endpoints here, and that means that when I write it, I'm going to write, the lines under the inequality sign. There's my range right there. My y's are between 0 and 4. If they hadn't restricted the domain, what do you think the range would have been? If they had just said the domain is all real numbers, this would be easier to figure out by looking up here at the board, at the calculator screen if you're listening.
0 or bigger than 0?
Yeah, if they had said the domain is all real numbers, which usually is what we do. We usually don't restrict it like this unless we've got a really specific word problem and we're only considering, certain values. Then this thing would have gone on. Let me draw it on here. It just keeps going. If the domain had been all real numbers, your range would have been numbers. How would you describe those numbers in green now?
0 is less than or equal to y.
Well, how about
Y is greater than or equal to 0.
y is greater than or equal to 0? Good. That's what you wanted. All your y's are at 0 or up, right? So they're bigger than 0. They're positive, and they can be 0 because we got one point right here that's 3, 0. So we can't have a y of 0. So we would write our range that way if it had been all real numbers. Okay? So that's kind of what you're doing. As we move into these other ones down here, like 13 through 16, is those the ones that some of you said you had trouble with? Let's look at those now. So just kind of going over this again, it says tell the domain and the range. The domain stands for what? X's or Y's? X's. And here's the way to remember it if you forget. When you write a coordinate point, your X's are the things you plug in, the Y's are the things you get out. X and Y are in alphabetical order. If you were to think about it, isn't D come before R in the alphabet? So that's one quick way. If you just get them backwards, it's just think alphabetize them. And D are your X's. So your X values here, they connect this. What x's have they graphed in here? Remember, this is my x-axis, my horizontal axis here. You could take your pencil, and I'm going to put little red dots because on the video you can't tell what I'm doing. But if I took my pencil and I started it here and I moved it this way until I got to here, what's the lowest x value I would get for my domain?
Or 6.
Okay, the lowest one would be down here, right? So it'd be -4? Okay. So would y'all agree with me that my x values are between -4 and what other number? Tell me the others. There's where the 6 is, yeah.
I was thinking lowest, and so I don't know why.
That's okay.
Did you get that right? Wow.
Okay, now I gotta show that everything in between counts. How am I going to show that? You know?
X is bigger and equal to 4.
Okay, I'm going to put these marks. That's saying that all my x's are bigger than -4, but they're less than -6. You can break it apart by like covering up. That's supposed to be an x, and it, didn't turn out so well. But you can say all my x's are bigger than -4, and then cover up this one. All my x's are less than 6. See how you can break it up, and it sometimes you get cross-eyed if you look at everything all together. Do that, it might help.
How would it also be equal to -4?
Do you notice on this graph that they drew those open dots and they didn't color them in?
Okay.
The open dots mean we don't count the endpoint.
No, I see.
So that's why I'm not going to put a line under those inequalities. What about the range? I'm going to use purple for this in case you're listening to this again at home, or you weren't here and you're listening to it. If I start down at the lowest y, pretend that's a pencil, that purple dotted thing I'm doing right now is a pencil. But what's the lowest y that I hit? -2. Y'all agree? It's the lowest one, okay. What's the highest one that I hit? 7, right? Everybody good with that? And my y's are between there, aren't they? So how I show that is just stick those little, things like that. That shows y is sandwiched in between -2 and 7. I'm not going to put lines under my inequality signs here. Why not? Because of the open dots. The open dots mean I'm not gonna do that. So there's my range and my domain right there. If you take your pencil and you move it for the x's, if you move it across the x-axis, and what's the smallest one you hit and what's the biggest one you hit, and then all your x's are between that. That's a good way to do it when they've given you a piece of a graph like this. On most functions, things go to infinity or something, But they didn't give you any here because they're not giving you practice on that yet. They're just showing you,